Well, government is one step closer to secretly surveilling all your conversations, chats and emails. Parliament is discussing the RICA and General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill. It will allow government to listen to any private conversation under the veil of a national security. Now, let's discuss this further with cybercrime expert Andy Mashaile and forensic investigator Chad Thomas. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me this morning. Of course, this is, quite shocking news to South Africans who don't know this yet, and they're finding out right now that this is something that is on the cards. I think maybe, Andy, let's start with you. What do you think if these bills, get into law? What are the complications here, the impacts on South Africans' privacy?
South Africans, first things first, morning to you, Baron, and the beautiful viewers of your show. The impact will be severely negative, particularly for those people who are not committing crime. Those people who have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of association, and many other freedoms will be suspended when you look at the impact, intended and unintended, of these bills should they become law. I was speaking on the subject 2 days ago, how to remain anonymous online. And in my research and my discussions with some of the panelists and the people who are involved with Overseas, I was shocked to realize that this bill mirrors what the National Security Agency in America is doing. All communications go through the communications center, which is in the heart of this bill. Your National Communications Center is going to filter everything and everything that you send, text, image, communications, whatever form of communication. And those who have control of the exit as well as the entrance control us in terms of our freedoms to speech and freedom of association.
And I think, Chad, maybe, many would then now say, something like this is necessary in South Africa. We've recently been under cyber attacks, by other countries as well. But of course, this is South Africans. It's their conversations. It is their privacy at the end of the day. But it's not necessary to say that, every South African's conversation will now be looked at and watched. Yes, to play devil's advocate here, don't you think this might be a necessary step, or could there be other measures taken to control or to have these bills control, crime in that sense?
So yes, thank you for the opportunity to chat to you and the viewers today. In respect of these two particular bills that are before Parliament, the one is obviously to amend RICA in respect to the fact that Amabungane successfully contested certain sections of it and succeeded at Constitutional Court level, and that now has to be amended. In respect of GLAB and the conditions contained therein, the surveillance and the bulk surveillance is just a mere facet of the Act. The Act actually is looking towards amending the intelligence law so that they can once again split up the State Security Agency. The State Security Agency is our all-encompassing civil intelligence agency. It's made up of the two domestic and foreign agencies, that being the National Intelligence Agency and the other being the South African Secret Service. It's now a super agency of sorts, and they want to break it down back into a domestic and a foreign arm. And we need that. Intelligence is very important. They also want to increase the capabilities of these intelligence agencies to be able to vet organizations, including the private security sector, which I think is a good thing. The private security industry is massive, with over 800,000 registered members. It's bigger than the police, the army, correctional services combined. And apart from CIRA as the oversight body, it would be great to have other oversight, because we do know that rogue elements have seeped into the security industry as well, and people that are criminals operate under the guise of security companies. So all of these bills and the amendments aren't just mass surveillance orientated, but people are obviously very concerned. If you look at Section 14 of the Constitution, in terms of the Bill of Rights, your right to privacy is enshrined. Section 14D goes as far as to talk about digital privacy. But Section 36 of the Constitution talks about a limitation of the rights that people have. And of course, when we're living in a country that is crime-ridden, in fact, we have a war against crime. We need every single tool that's available. So if we have, like in the Patriot Act, mass surveillance with key words and they are surveilling people of interest, it can only be to the benefit to try to break the back of crime.
Now then, Andy, you know, there probably are some oversights here that you can maybe explain to us when it comes to oversight mechanisms, you know, that's currently lacking in these bills. Are there any, and what can you say they are?
I am sure what is contained in the bill right now, that speaks to the power of the Inspector General of Intelligence and the impact that he can have in terms of regulating what is within and what is outside of the law. I am sure it will serve in the best interest. And let me emphasize, Baron, we need these kinds of bills to deal with what Chet has indicated, to deal with serious transnational organized crime that we have seen putting South Africa #3 in Africa from an organized crime point of view, and South Africa #7 internationally out of 193 countries. Also the issue of money laundering and many of these evils that are plaguing our community and our country, including your construction mafia in their communication in the event of planning disruptions to any sites that might be active. One is not foolish not to want our country or our law enforcement agencies, particularly your state security agency, to have a power of going through sifting those communications of the targeted individuals or individuals of interest. I want to believe that with the Inspector General and all other bodies that would be one oversight proposed in the bill should not only be for the purposes of paper writing or paper scratching, but real impact in terms of the adjudication and regulation of any matters of conflict with the law as put forward by the bill in the separated external intelligence and internal intelligence.
Now, of course, you know, this bill is being compared to, Chad, to the US, the very controversial one in the United States, but also the Russia SORM, also another controversial one in Russia, SORM, the same system basically. It's being compared to that. Now, what Andy also touched on just now slightly is, you know, maybe, you know, how do we make sure that there's not an abuse of power here by government and its surveillance?
We want to look at surveillance from the perspective of RICA and the Act 70 interception that allows for interception of communications. It has to be signed off by a RICA judge. It's done under very strict conditions. But of course, we've seen in the past how some of this was circumvented by rogue elements within the state security cluster. We have to have oversight. We have to increase the role of the Inspector General of Intelligence to make sure that the Inspector General of Intelligence is capacitated. We have all these oversight organizations. If one looks at IPID for the police, if one looks at the integrity unit within the NPA, but it all comes down to capacitating these divisions or these organizations or these watchdogs to ensure that they're able to protect the interests of the public at large. So it's a double-edged sword. We need this mechanism to go through Parliament so that we can effectively fight this war that we have currently against crime. But at the same time, we do have to ensure that the interests of normal citizens are protected and that they're not caught up in any kind of mass surveillance.
And I think that's the very last point I wanted to touch on there. And I think, Andy, maybe you can answer that for us. You know, the key concerns here, of course, it is South African citizens, and they are worried about these bills right now. And like we said, there are these other bodies that will make sure that regulation is there and it is, you know, being regulated. But of course, how do we make sure that South Africans are protected and that this is something in their best interest? Very lastly from you.
Baron, when we communicate like we are doing and explaining things in detail, or acts or laws in detail as we do, this platform that we are riding on, you and I, serves to ease the fears and the tensions of the ordinary South African walking down the street. Right now, there is interception loaded in RICA. So you and I understand and know that there is interception that is already going on from the RICA point of view. It is against that background that South Africans must help law enforcement agencies and all other agencies that are interested in crime prevention and crime combating. Obviously, before crime prevention and crime combating, you need what you want to call, for the want of a better word, data, or do your research. But in a proper context, you need intelligence, your strategic and tactical intelligence, and where you harvest it in your open source intelligence platforms, as well as your signal intelligence platforms, which happens in this case to be the airwaves and what we are discussing. If that is properly harvested without any rogue, I think the major challenges with people here, rogue elements who might use this information for nefarious and satanic purposes.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. Of course, that was Andy Mashile, cybercrime expert and forensic investigator, Chad Thomas, joining me this morning just to discuss the bills, the RICA and the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill. That, of course, being discussed by Parliament to basically what's being said, listen into private conversations of South Africans. But of course, like we heard now, this is part of a bigger national security system that is necessary to protect South Africans as well. But of course, there are these other concerns, and hopefully this will be regulated to perfection so that we as South Africans are also safe from not being abused by powers.